And maybe the individual will be
Present.
present. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was going to do as well. I just wanted to double check on
Okay.
all of that.
Confirming with you that we're live.
Great, awesome. Thank you. Good to see you, Kiana and Brad. Thank you for being here so we can have a meeting. Um, Vicky is in Moorea, so we will be jealous of her and yeah, get some
Morning,
details when she comes
everybody.
back. Hi. Okay, it is right on the hour. And if is OCCSR ready for us to proceed? Just want to make sure folks who are here who need to be here are in fact here.
Yes, correct, Chair. And I can
Okay.
start with roll.
Okay, I will start by calling the meeting to order. So, aloha everybody. I call this meeting to order and pass it to Director Gonzer to do our roll call.
Great. Aloha, good morning. Chair Aligato,
Present.
Vice Chair Keener has noted her absence. Commissioner Otsuka,
Here.
Commissioner Romine,
Present.
and Commissioner Islam has also noted an extended absence as well. Chair, we have 3 members present, which is quorum.
Wonderful. Okay, so the third item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the August 25th, 2023 meeting. Do any of the commissioners have any corrections or updates to this the meeting minute draft? I'll begin with Commissioner. Oh yeah, Commissioner Romine, you're unmuted, so
Oh, just gonna say none for me, Chair. Thank you.
great. Commissioner Otsuka?
None for me.
Okay, wonderful. Are there any comments or testimony from the public? And I'll remind you all that testimony is limited to 3 minutes in length, and I will time you. Okay, seeing that there are no comments and testimony on this particular item, is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the Climate Change Commission meeting from August 2023?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you, Kiana. All right, everybody who votes in favor of adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm noting everyone present is voting to adopt it. There are no nays, and so we will adopt the minutes from the last meeting. Okay, moving right along. I'm going to hand it over to Director Gonzer to request the report on activities for the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resilience.
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Gonzer. I serve as Executive Director for the City's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, and happy to provide some updates since the last meeting on August the 25th. Starting with some personnel changes within the office, we want to mahalo an outgoing staff member, Rory Kirkpatrick, who served as the Climate Action and Mobility Specialist. We do intend to re-advertise this position in short time, so please follow along at Resilient Oahu and sign up for our newsletter, and people can be aware of when that opportunity is on the streets. But we're also very excited to welcome 6 new people to the team. Christopher Atkanis started on August the 28th as our inaugural fleet electrification analyst, and this is really to advance and implement components of the resilience strategy, the climate action plan, Ordinance 20-47 that really charted what the city and the office must do, in collaboration with other departments to think about clean fleet and the responsible and economical transition thereof. And we're excited to have his expertise on board. Jennifer Sue, Dr. Jenny Sue, joined also on the 28th as our budget and operations specialist, which is critical for us as we continue to work with other departments and then also pursue our own granting opportunities and just ensuring that we maintain strategic focus in all that we're trying to accomplish. Two others that joined on Monday, September the 11th. We were super excited to be able to finally now partner with the Hawaii Sea Grant College Program for their GRA Fellowship, which is a postgraduate stipended fellowship, a 2-year opportunity. And we're pleased that we were able to sync this with somewhat of our transition from the 5.5 years of the AmeriCorps Vista program. So we have 2 individuals that have joined, one within our climate adaptation team, that's Claire Rossi de Leon, the climate adaptation GRA fellow, and then working within our hazard mitigation team, Madeline Kruger, who's our coast and hazard mitigation fellow. So as a former Sea Grant employee, E. Gordon Gra was my first boss. So it's really exciting to be able to sort of come, not quite full circle, I don't know what the shape is, but be able to continue to advance this kind of really important partnership with our local university and the leadership and namesake of Gordon Gra. And then we also had 2 other individuals join the team just last week, Monday, a new position supported by the Castle Foundation, Madison Priest, who's running tech today. Thanks, Madison. She's our policy and grants specialist, as I mentioned, really helping us think about the next stages of implementation of Climate Ready Oahu, the still forthcoming adaptation strategy, keeping our eyes on the horizon for funding opportunities that can support any department, really. So we're very appreciative of the partnership with Castle Foundation and very excited to have Madison on board. And then last but not least is Victor Limon, who joined the team as our inaugural sustainability data analyst. So there's a lot of reporting that we must do, but we also know that there's a lot that can be improved upon information management and other systems to actually implement what we're trying to do, track, learn, and course correct. And we're super excited that Victor was able to come back to the office. He actually was a summer intern back in 2019. So this is really great to keep bringing a lot of new energy to the team and a lot of excitement towards the work. Turning now to some projects. Just recently, the city's Department of Environmental Services was the first city agency to tap into a unique contract that all the counties are able to tap into from the State Department of Transportation. They have a contract with a provider called Sustainability Partners for different forms of quote unquote infrastructure as a service. And it is a unique opportunity. It might not be the solution for all of our needs, but we're excited that ENV was able to sort of chart the course and test it a little bit. And it's very early stages at this point. In short, they're getting a vehicle and a charger as a way to further explore, short of purchasing and doing our own infrastructure investments, kind of a, I'm going to oversimplify it, but a leasing mechanism where we're then working with this agency, organization, Sustainability Partners. And a lot of other state agencies have really led, but this is the first time at the city that we've tapped into the vehicle, sorry, the mechanism, I should say, for this contracting. And then on our side, I mentioned continuing to collaborate with other agencies. We're excited about some early discussions that have really identified different ways we can partner and tap into, whether it's the infrastructure bill or the Inflation Reduction Act. We're working with our Department of Land Management, which has a portfolio of city affordable housing. There's an interesting HUD program called Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, and we're looking at one particular building as an opportunity for efficiency improvements, maintaining affordability for those residents, and improving that facility generally. Environmental services, again, is really a leader in a lot of this work. We're exploring a different opportunity within the Inflation Reduction Act called direct pay. So this is somewhat oversimplified as like the municipal side of tax credits that are available to individuals, where you can go out and do a thing, you get a rebate or a tax credit. You know, government is, we don't pay the IRS, you know, annual income taxes or anything of the sort, but there was an awareness that really local governments or other governments can also benefit from some of the savings on clean energy, clean transportation, et cetera. And it does require new work and different things that the city doesn't currently do in terms of reporting to the IRS on an annual basis, but we're excited to potentially get, you know, upwards of 30% cost savings on different PV projects and continue to maximize these resources that are available and bring them to bear for our local community. And then lastly, working with the Department of Transportation Services and other city agencies, even though we're now in the early stages of phase 1 of an EPA grant under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, just last week, the phase 2 implementation notice for funding opportunity came out. So this is really about those that were fortunate to be phase 1 recipients now can be positioned through that planning activity to go after a bigger pool of resources for actually implementing the things that you're trying to do. And we want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves to, again, tap into those monies, but also coordinate with the state, because the state is also a direct recipient of the same EPA grant. We know we have different needs, but if there's a way to be strategic about a competitive opportunity, we want to continue to explore that moving forward. And then on project side, we're pretty jazzed to now get into the new fiscal year and things that we were working on last year. We've had a couple project kickoffs just recently with the team that's helping us dream up an affordable greenhousing retrofit program. And this is something that other jurisdictions or municipalities have had for some time. And we're trying to sync it also with what we will be learning through the building benchmarking program. Part of that program was always intended to allow the city to be more aware so that we could be a better partner on helping to drive efficiency and maintain affordability for, in particular, multi-unit residential properties. And with that data and then information, the potential federal resources on the table, maybe even the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, working with a partner like Hawaii Energy, we're excited to continue to explore, to do new things and provide direct benefits to residents across the island. We also have a project underway with the UH Institute for Sustainability and Resilience, ISR, right? Yes. Looking at different coastal profiles, really getting a better sense on the socio-demographic and economic makeup, somewhat advancing what was done through the 2017 statewide sea level rise vulnerability and adaptation report. And that's one component on then a next step, which is really exploring what, if any, potential there may or may not be for something like a transfer of development rights program. We know that's a really challenging sort of market structure. And though we've all sort of been talking about it as a potential to help facilitate getting people out of harm's way in the coastal zone and driving development in the places that we've been intending to do, a lot of infill development in the primary urban center or in the Ewa Plain, it warrants more research, and we're glad that we were able to partner on some of the data collection and the economic analysis. And then lastly, on the project side, we've launched 2 heat projects in particular. Certainly relates to an item on the agenda today, the continued discussion of the heat guidance document. We were internalizing even the early recommendations from the versions that were on discussion last year. And heat is unique in that we know it's getting hotter outside as a result of climate change. So what can we do to mitigate against the increasing temperatures into the future? But we also know that there are moments in time where heat can be even more exacerbated, something like a heat wave. So in heat, we think about heat mitigation and heat management, both the shocks and the stresses of the heat risk. And we have 2 projects underway that I'm sure we would be pleased to provide updates as they progress. And then very lastly, though she's not here, I just want to mahalo the Vice Chair, Dr. Victoria Keener, who joined me on September the 13th at the City Council Committee on Housing, Sustainability, and Health. We provided 2 informational briefings to that committee. One, a presentation on the Commission's 2023 updated climate change brief, and then I followed up with a status update on the in development climate adaptation strategy, which we're calling Climate Ready Oahu, and can answer any questions about the timeline, because I think it may also relate to the discussion about potential next meetings. I'll pause there, Chair, and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Matt. As always, OCCSR just always brings it with the amazing progress and motivation and activity. Want to open it up for questions from any of the commissioners before I have, ask my own. Kiana, do you have any questions?
Hi, Matt. I have a couple of questions. One, I just want to say I'm really sad that Rory's gone, and I really hope you folks are able to fill that position quickly, given that our transportation emissions are our highest or single source emissions on Oahu. But I wanted to ask, with Rory's departure, are you folks sort of putting on pause like the climate action plan actions or strategies that we were looking at kind of last month? And or if the emissions reduction plan had been completed before her departure, or is there any sort of update on in terms of who kind of fills in on a couple of her responsibilities?
Great, thank you for the question, Commissioner Natsuka. No, there's no get up, there's no let up in the work. There's no pause, there's no delay. Climate can't bear delay. So, Ben and myself are picking up some of the workload. You mentioned a lot of things, and for the group's awareness, so within the city, within CCSR's responsibility, we must convene and coordinate across all of the city agencies to develop a 5-year climate action plan. The first one was adopted in 2021. We're underway. We're almost halfway through. We're taking stock, assessing, and this definitely relates to the EPA grant that we had gotten under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, both phases. So no, that work is ongoing. But you also mentioned the transportation emissions reduction plan or strategy, for the group's awareness. Actually, the same year that CCSR was created in city charter by the voters, a couple of other things came into being in terms of functional plans for different agencies, and one of them actually was for the Department of Transportation Services to produce this emissions reduction strategy. So no, that work also continues, and it's nearly wrapping up. And also want to mahalo the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization, which funded that project, and the Ulupono Initiative, which was our non-federal cost share match. And we're glad that we can continue to work with the Department of Transportation Services on that.
Here, can I ask one more question? Okay, great. Matt, I was hoping you could share a little bit more about the process by which you folks went through to hire people via the Castle Foundation grant. I'm really curious about that, and whether those folks are permanent or it's like a 2-year pot of money you were able to get for hiring these folks. Anything you can share about that, I'd be really interested to hear.
Sure. The Castle Foundation, they themselves are expanding a new portfolio of work focused on climate change adaptation. And I might be getting a little bit ahead of like a blog and a news release that they will have soon, and describing sort of their expansion into this work and some opportunities for other small grants. But that is it's a short term, I guess, in our work. It's a 2-year funding opportunity.
Thank you.
Brad, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a few comments, maybe one question as well. First of all, mahalo, Director Gonzer, for all those updates. It's always great to hear all the great stuff going on in your office. I want to mahalo outgoing member of your office and welcome and thank all the folks coming in. It's great to hear about all those additions, including the Sea Grant Fellows. I'm really glad we were able to make that happen this year. I'm also really want to thank you and give my appreciation for the coordination with the state on the EPA grant for greenhouse gas mitigation and reduction. It's great to see that cooperation. I'm really, really glad to see that. And thank you for Vice Chair Keener for doing that presentation to the City Council committee as well. I did watch a recording of that, and looks like it was well received by the committee. I do have one question. Has there been any action on resolution 23-162, the climate resilience fund, since we last met? It doesn't appear so from the online information. Am I missing something there?
I believe at whatever the last full city council meeting or committee meeting was, it was re-referred. So though it's progressed quite far in its hearings, it's not on the agenda for next week, Wednesday, at the full city council meeting. I think the subject matter chair had actually requested to bring it back to his committee for further discussion. So I haven't seen it posted since then. It's possible it'll be on the October the 18th Housing, Sustainability and Health Committee, but I don't have more information at this time.
That's all I have. Thanks for that, Matt. Appreciate it.
Okay, I have a couple questions before we open it up to questions to the public. My first is, I just have like clarification questions. I was really interested in the EPA grant that you mentioned, and that it was for pollution. I was wondering if you can talk about like what specific types of pollution these monies were directed for, and in particular, is any of it related to Red Hill?
No, so within the EPA, their climate pollution reduction grant program, it's all about emissions reduction.
Okay.
So
Alright.
it's climate action planning. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And then my second question is, I have some familiarity with kind of the structure around transfer of development rights. This is referring to your new kind of ISR project and kind of looking at exploring the potential for transfer of development rights. I'm just wondering if you could expand a little bit about what you are thinking and what is some of the dialogue or conversation that's going around that.
Sure. And again, the project is in early stages, so maybe I can just take a higher level about TDR, transfer of development rights in general. So there has always been state, or for a period of time, there's been state enabling legislation for the counties to execute and implement different regimes for TDR. Primarily, the original authorities were focused on preservation of ag land, preservation of open spaces. But a couple of years ago, there was a new state statute that primarily indicated and sort of telegraphed that, yes, it's also okay to deploy something like TDR for risk mitigation, specifically coastal hazards or other hazards, say, it could be stream hazards or flooding hazards of the like. And this is one of the many sort of suite of potential strategies that groups like the Georgetown Climate Center have had in terms of research across the nation, even more locally. Back in 2011, I believe, there was a different UHC Grant Center of Excellence, the ICAP Center at the law school. They had sort of a sea level rise toolkit, one of which also included in theory, the thought that transfer development right could support facilitating getting people out of harm's way. So that's the thinking behind it at this point, and we're primarily focused on what it might be able to afford for sea level rise adaptation efforts, reducing harm, protecting and preserving beaches, and then a co-benefit of where possible and appropriate redirecting infill development and growth to some of our other goals and policies, whether it's transit-oriented development and other infill opportunities within the urban core that then also support some of our climate action planning.
Thanks so much. I'm really interested in where this goes and how it develops. So perhaps maybe in some future we can have, as the project develops, maybe we can have a presentation from ISR about what you guys have found.
Sure. And I don't want to call her out, but former chair and commissioner of the Climate Change Commission, Dr. McKenna Kaufman, is our point of contact for that work. So, you know, as we progress, I'm sure there could be opportunities to invite for a presentation.
Great. At this time, I'm wondering if there's any questions or comments or testimony from the public who are present about the activities that Director Gonzer just reported on. Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on to what I predict will take up some of the bulk of the rest of our oh, I will pause. There is a question from Felix. I apologize if I do not pronounce your last name correctly. I'm going to say it's Gottinger. Felix, would you like to come off of mute and ask your question?
Yeah, I think the green retrofit program sounds really interesting, and I was just wondering if like public housing is also going to be involved.
So we just had the kickoff meeting on Wednesday, actually, and it's really about the development and structure of a program, like how it could run, how it should run. The ultimate, you know, end users or benefits are certainly open for discussion. Just a note on at least the state's public housing. There's been, you know, through the Hawaii Public Housing Authority, they've actually done a lot of good work around assessing and retrofitting, but it doesn't mean it still means that there could be possible opportunities to improve efficiency as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Felix. If anybody else has questions before we move on to the next item, please indicate by either raising your virtual Zoom hand or typing your question in the chat. That would be great. Okay, so as I kind of alluded to, I think we're going to probably spend some of the bulk of the rest of the meeting on the discussion of the tourism brief, which is in development. That brief was shared with the public. I do want to acknowledge that this brief is in the process of being developed with an intern that we have through the Institute for Sustainability and Resilience at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and the commission has always benefited from you know, the presence of interns who help us to, you know, create and move forward this work. So at this time, I'm going to share screen. And for those of you who have not experienced this before, including commissioners, this is possibly some of the most painful part of what it means to be on the Climate Change Commission. Because of sunshine laws, it is extremely difficult to write and edit these. And so we are forced to do a lot of this editing in public. And so I'm going to, you all had, I believe, a PDF document. I'm going to share the Word document so that I can do live editing while we have this discussion. So at this time, I'm going to share my screen. So please let me know if you are unable to see it. I'm now sharing screen. Can I get an indication from somebody, one of the commissioners or Matt, if you can see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start by going through just the general body of the organization of it. And then at this time, what I'd like to do, and my plan is to start with the commissioners, is to kind of get recommendations on feedback. Again, this is the very first showing of it, and so I expect that we will have to agendize this at least 2 more times so that we can get proper input from everybody. Now, if you have taken notes on this is again specifically for the commissioners, if you have specific feedback that might be extensive, I want to, in the spirit of trying to do this for sunshine, I want you to, number 1, tell us what it is, and then please forward that to, and again, Matt, let me know if I'm misspeaking here. Please forward that to Karan, who can appropriately distribute that feedback so we can get it incorporated. I'm the point person for this brief at this time. Matt, does that sound like a copacetic plan?
Yep, that sounds okay on process.
Okay, again, I apologize if any of this is like crazy. If you also cannot see, please let me know and I can make it bigger. Um, oh, okay, so Matt, Director Gonza reminded me this is just discussion. I'm not collecting comments. And also, of course, there's no action. And so I'm going to just kind of go through it. So some of our briefs are solicited or requested by different entities within the city and county of Honolulu. Sometimes it's the mayor, sometimes maybe another office. This is a brief that we undertook as part of, some of you may remember, we kind of opened up the discussion to the public for what kinds of matters were really important to them, and where we wanted to see the intersection of those matters and climate change. Tourism and climate change rose to something that several members of the public were interested in discussing and us analyzing. And so based on that interest, really deriving from the public, I think this is one of the first briefs that I would say we're kind of deriving from the public interest. We are taking this up. So of course, it always begins with our preamble. We're looking at trying to understand the intersection between climate change and tourism, where activities both contribute to greenhouse gas emissions and are impacted by the effects. We wanted to, you'll also note that generally we will come out just out front with recommendations as well as bullet points, because we are in what I really want to say the inception and infancy stage of this brief. We haven't come out with that yet because we're still kind of looking at what is the data that we have, what is the information that we have, and perhaps what additional information might we want to collect before we as a commission come up with recommendations. I also want to say, if through the reading of the information that we have gathered thus far, if Commissioner Otsuka or Commissioner Romine or Keener, if any of the commissioners has recommendations to add, even though I'm the point person, I really want to welcome and invite you to create and suggest some recommendations. Okay, so we're hoping that this will be sort of the process for how we can co-create these briefs, is that we can, if some of us have recommendations that become apparent, but if there are others that other commissioners have, please bring them forth. Okay, so we're holding off on what the specific recommendations are at this time, with the recognition that we are not okay, and I'm going to ask for Matt's help on this. We're not a commission that puts forth like legislation. We're a commission that provides information. We can provide recommendations. Would that be an accurate assessment of, there's a term, but I'm just blanking on it right now.
No, I think the cleaner is that, there are other commissions that actually are quasi-decisional in terms of, what the planning commission or the building zoning board, zoning board of appeals does. So certainly within recommendations, those recommendations might be policy recommendations as well.
Correct. Okay. So again, with the help, I really want to commend and thank our intern, Izzy Roberson, for putting together a lot of this information that I asked. So our process was that I had some ideas based on feedback. I met with Izzy as well as her supervisor in the in ISR, and we kind of put together like what were some general information that we wanted. And so again, if there's more information you all think we need to include, or case studies that you know of that aren't presented here that might be informative, please let me know about them. So this is a general summation of the tourism industry in Hawaii. It is Hawaii's largest industry. These are up-to-date facts of how much, as of 2019, visitors spend. It does kind of make an acknowledgement of the impact of the COVID pandemic. And this kind of brings up different ways that we can see potentially how climate change intersects with the terms in the sector. Okay, Kiana.
Hi, Ruzi. I was hoping before we jump in to get a little bit more background information on this guidance document. So I think both Brad and I weren't here sort of when this idea popped up and we started pursuing it. So I was hoping you could share a little bit more about, like, one, what was sort of the public comments on encouraging us to work on this, and then two, what you see sort of like the vision for this document, and or sort of I don't know if purpose is the right word, but yeah, I guess maybe vision for what we use this document for. That would be helpful for me to give good comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for helping me to better contextualize this document. So a number of people in the public came forward and were interested in us looking at tourism. I think because of, you know, when tourism really kind of reopened in Hawaii, we could really begin to see a lot of the impacts to the people, impacts to the environment. We know that environmental degradation, you know, potentially puts us more at risk, and also just bringing up the question of the contribution of tourism to our greenhouse gas production, right? So our resident population is about 1 million, but of course we have many more visitors who are here. And so I think really digging into, you know, a lot of these impacts that we're seeing, how much of is it contributed by the visitor industry? How much what are the different facets under which this large number of visitors kind of increases our vulnerability, right? So everything from potential, now I'm just literally talking out of my, you know, food systems, acute disaster events, right? Like response needs. These were some of the this area here, the number of ways that climate change might impact, were some of the just very surface ways that we first initially kind of came to this. So greenhouse gas emissions, consumption of natural resources, specifically water. At this point in time when we brought it up, we were very much alarmed by the Red Hill water situation, knowing that we have I think out of any resource, I would say our water consumption and our water usage, because it is groundwater based, is finite, right? And so kind of thinking through some of the questions around when policies come out and who are most affected. Oftentimes, you know, at least in other counties, we see water discretionary policies being enforced on the local community, but not necessarily on the tourism industry. Is that something we want to really reconsider? Kind of, again, thinking about environmental and ecological degradation, not just trails, but our coral reef systems, food systems. Perhaps actually there's a positive, because one thing we learned, for example, through the pandemic is that, you know, the tourist industry does support at some level, you know, by, you know, being a market for local food production. So I kind of wanted to ask this question to see what is the impact? What is the impact of having like 10 million visitors extra a year, just people and bodies, when, you know, and how does that impact? Of course, also recognizing that, you know, this economy does contribute very much needed revenues for us to be able to create the change that is needed to make us more resilient. So it's very much a balanced question. It might very much be that our recommendations center around what are numbers we need to pay better attention to, or maybe even what are things we need to start counting or monitoring. I'll say this right now, I don't necessarily see our recommendations being something so prescriptive as we need to limit visitors to X number of people a year. That's not where I see it going. I see it very much kind of like, if we are really concerned about this, our numbers, our ability to model City and County of Honolulu's future may be better refined by counting and really paying attention to this whole visitor industry that is here, that's like actual many more bodies. So yeah, I hope that helps. Commissioner Romine, do you have any other questions, or, you know, Commissioner, like just general, like kind of what the, you know, whatever, what the context is going into this?
Not for me at this time, Chair. That was all really helpful though. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's just that we talk about it a lot, you know, like what are the impacts of the tourism industry? How does it maybe make us more vulnerable? And we don't really have numbers on that. So I just thought it would be good for us to kind of delve into that. And like I said, I think some of our recommendations may be for us to track it so that we can then have the fullness of number, a lot of this evidence to make those better decisions or better make arguments in either direction about some of that. Yeah. So again, I'm just going to move through this. Don't worry. I know that folks have put in some testimony and we will allow you to testify. I just want to go through this. So one of the things that I've had conversations with Izzy about is, in thinking about some of these intersections, does it make sense to group some of the impacts into something similar to what Director Gonzer had brought up with regard to heat, right? Shocks versus stressors. What are ways in which the tourism industry or individuals who engage in tourism into Hawaii, so you could see like maybe, for example, water is a long-term kind of stressor, but something like a natural disaster is a shock, right? So that's something where I'm kind of thinking about this in terms of the organization of the paper. Totally open for more. So this next section goes into the background of information that we have. And again, if there's information missing, that's an opportunity for us to make a recommendation. So it's time we can identify gaps. So visitors and greenhouse gases, here are some of the numbers that we have that they contribute to 22.01 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. That's Hawaii. And again, this is an increase, and kind of looking at the energy sector being the biggest contributor, comprising 88% of the sources. And Oahu, of course, is our largest county. And so our city and county does account for a majority of that. And from the energy sector, 94% of Oahu's total emissions. I do want to say that Kaufman et al. Did attempt to account for the contributions to that, both in upstream and downstream sources. And I do also want to say a lot of desire from the public did want to go into kind of really addressing that from the perspective of, and I apologize if I misspeak at all, and those who did have concern are here today and can provide that testimony. There was concern about, can we really address airline travel specifically? This commission felt uncomfortable taking that up because we really felt that was out of our purview, and that we really want to encourage that conversation to happen at the state level. But for the purposes of this document, we felt like it was about a bit out of our purview. So anyhow, so we talked about that there's basically this finding that visitors contribute the same proportional amounts in greenhouse gas emissions within the economy. There is a limited scenario, and that, the tax scenario accounts only for emissions that are fueled within the borders of the state. And again, as I said, there was a lot of interest in pursuing and focusing on domestic aviation. Just like as far as computing those numbers, it's really outside the purview of what we're doing here. And so, we do recognize that perhaps a more holistic footprint might be analyzed. And there's different ways that can be attained through this. We also want to recognize that it's not just domestic airlines, there's also international cruise liners, and there's transport fuels around that as well. And so this was the following calculation that was provided, and we can kind of argue or discuss around that. So that was one aspect. So I can envision perhaps a recommendation relating to that. I can also envision a recommendation relating to visitors and water. And when I say recommendation, I don't necessarily mean like visitors should use less water. Perhaps the recommendation is, we really hone down on the accounting and determine what is the usage, and perhaps that might better inform when advisories go out, or water use advisories. So obviously we know that our rainfall, our annual precipitation is declining, and that we are also having more droughts, which require more reliance on groundwater. These are basic numbers around the state consumption of water. and really nice numbers around our input-output tables. And really then trying to hone in on non-ag water and thinking about how do we count this water. There's very high use of utilities by the hospitality industry or the accommodation industry. There is a really high demand that visitors have for accommodation. And so, if we are looking for how much visitors are using, you can kind of you can use the accommodation industry use as a proxy. So these are not precise. And perhaps, again, this is the identification of a gap through which we can make a recommendation on how can we better account for, really get a handle on how much visitors are using. The bottom line, of course, which is, we don't need this brief to tell us this, is that visitors and visitor industry create additional demands for fresh water. And so I think that we do need to consider it. How do we consider it? We have to be able to count it. And again, then of course, there's a lot around the environment and ecology. I would really like us to focus on not only just the terrestrial impacts, but our marine impacts as well, because a lot of our marine resources are important for our ability to kind of like storm buffer, but also for indigenous practices as well. So, obviously beachgoers can contribute to degradation of beach dunes, high foot traffic, erosion, degradation of coral reefs. This is a little bit harder to quantify, but I think we should make an attempt to kind of think about the ecosystem services that, help provide a barrier to flooding, or, provide barriers or mitigate for coastal erosion. And, if there's more ecosystem services that I've missed, I think that would be good. Food systems, we obviously want to recognize that Hawaii imports so much of its food, and there has been a really large push, and there is a big push that we can increase our locally grown foods. I think it's called 30 by 30, right, to 30%. And that will also help with our food security, as well as decrease transportation fuel that is used. And one thing is, of course, that climate change can affect crop production, having to do with water usage, and it can impact infrastructure of the food system. And, I think there's a positive and a negative effect of there's a negative effect of climate change, but perhaps the tourism industry may play a positive role in supporting local food systems. And so that's a really important, I think, balancing kind of thing that we have to think about. And then, of course, visitors and emergency services. I think this really struck home in the last couple of months when we saw climate related natural disasters that we have seen in Lahaina, and what impact that visitors may have on utilizing these services and elsewhere, and recognizing that the first draft of this happened prior to the Lahaina fires. And so perhaps additional kind of observations and information can be put into this that we didn't realize, or prior to that. So I look for the assistance of other commissioners to help us to really have good coverage, because what we were really thinking was around tsunamis, hurricanes, storm flooding, and you can see that in the language here. We did not address wildfire, and so perhaps that's a paragraph that we can add. But the general idea is that we already know that our hurricane shelter infrastructure is aging, and shelter in place is only ever advisable if you can withstand hurricane force winds. So that leaves hurricane visitors as well as residents pretty vulnerable. Many of the larger hotels actually, as a positive, can serve as shelter in place. We also know that many of the hotels have taken in Maui residents, but the question is about like the time, the time scale on that and the burden. So these are all kinds of some things that we brought up. I am interested in getting your feedback on maybe a hotel industry perspective on how climate change might be impacting their viability and ability to invest in Hawaii. Obviously, I'm hoping that will come out through our stakeholder engagements that we might have. You know, how are hotels adapting? That's an interesting facet. I know it's not our responsibility, but if hotels are already kind of pre-thinking in that area, that's helpful for us. I was interested in looking at any case studies of locations that have potentially limited tourism, maybe in order to preserve aspects of the natural environment. And this is just kind of what I'm thinking is tracking impacts, tracking maybe our engagement with the tourism industry, and maybe we need to have a more proactive engagement network or something more formalized. And basically, I was thinking of 1 to 2 recommendations per section that I had up there. So with that, I kind of want to reopen it up to the commissioners, and then I, of course, open it up to the public for further discussion. I'm going to stop sharing at this point. Kiana.
Okay, Rosie, I have so many questions. Okay, so a couple of items I think might be missing. And I wanted to hear you and Brad and anybody else's input on whether it's appropriate to put in this document. So the first big one that came to mind, and I'm not sure if this does or doesn't overlap with climate change specifically, more maybe of an environmental justice issue, is the housing impacts with regard to short-term rentals. So I know the City and County of Honolulu ban short-term rentals, I think in non-resort zones. I think that's essentially what the bill says. But I'm wondering maybe having us quantify or someone quantify, or maybe that's a recommendation, quantifying the number of short-term rentals that aren't on the housing market. And then I think maybe this is a little bit too much into the weeds, but sort of the longer term impact on our housing market from people visiting and then purchasing homes. And again, I don't know if that data exists, but sort of the big one that came up when you're going through that. The other one in the emergency services, I'm wondering if we should also talk about evacuation, more specifically around our visitors and how that impacts our emergency services. So the Office of, Department of Emergency Management with the city came out with a really good plan talking about bottlenecks for evacuation. The city just did a really interesting study with their Alapono Bridge project about how we move people and what are some issues we see with everyone evacuating via car and how we can get people out walking and biking. And I think particularly Waikiki, a big center of our tourist industry, there's an opportunity, I think, for people to walk and bike or roll while evacuating, maybe more so than other places on the island. So maybe thinking more about how we incorporate evacuation. And then obviously I'm interested to get your input on whether we feel like transportation needs to be its own section. After the Office of Economic Revitalization presented at the commission, I think it was 2 meetings ago, the energy offices started very initially doing some work on how we quantify rental car VMT and how we look at actual number of miles, emissions, et cetera, and then thinking about how we move forward with helping visitors reduce their transportation emissions, something we're really interested in. So we started doing some work on that. So other question to you, Rosie, in terms of like timeline for this guidance document, because I think we're probably at least 2 years out from completing that. So we're sort of in the very initial period of getting our document together. And then the last one is, I know we don't recommend policy, but could we recommend, for example, looking into the green fee? So that was a piece of state legislation that didn't pass this past year, but got a lot of support and interest. So I'm wondering if there's a county level thing that the commission or OCCSR can look into recommending with regard to a green fee to support mitigation strategies that we recommend in this document. So thank you. I know that was a lot, sort of my initial thoughts.
This is great. Thank you. I'm basically going to say all of these sound good. I would probably ask for your assistance if we did make transportation its own section, maybe pairing transportation with evacuation. I don't know. If that's something that you feel you could contribute to writing. I mean, obviously, yeah. So I just, this is the first, there are so many things we could cover with this. I also think one thing that I want to be really attuned to is we can look very much at impacts of tourism, but we want to always um, interrogate and put the lens of the intersection with climate change. So I totally agree with you about the housing impacts. I just want us to make sure that we can draw some clear lines between housing impacts and climate change. So I recognize that and I totally support that. I think your suggestions on emergency services, transportation, and also the green fee as a way to maybe a benefit of tourism with regard to adaptation, moving forward, policies, maybe, and also, yeah, and supporting in these ecosystem services that help us to be more resilient are all great ideas. Commissioner Romine, what are your thoughts?
First of all, thank you, Chair, for all your work on the document so far, and that overview was real helpful, and the background information you provided. Kiana, I appreciated your suggestions, especially the one about transportation. That's one that had occurred to me in looking this over. I do think the reliance on rental cars and the greenhouse gas emissions from that is a key issue. We have, I think, a real opportunity to develop improved alternative transportation through rail, perhaps better shuttle service, maybe electrifying the rental fleet better. I think we can have more discussion and a recommendation around that would be real helpful. A few other things that occur to me. Maybe some discussion around energy use, particularly for air conditioning in our hotel visitor centers. It'd be good to have, if we can aggregate some numbers for that sector regarding energy use and air conditioning. And I think most importantly, is there alternatives? There was discussion years back about things like seawater-based air conditioning. Now, I don't know if that's on the table, not an expert in that, but I think we should have some discussion on maybe more environmentally friendly alternatives and energy use reductions that might be centered around particularly our hotel buildings and maybe air conditioning in particular. I think it also would be good to have some discussion of impacts to city parks and beach parks, but also our Malco parks. I think there's an overuse problem and an underfunding problem there. And I'm hearing your comments, Chair, about the need to connect that to climate change. And I think we can do that, maybe utilizing our parks as centers for education around impacts, including related to climate, and use those locations for examples for conservation and restoration to improve resilience. And I'm thinking about our beach parks here, maybe more so, but I think it also includes our Malco parks as well. And then finally, I'll end with a question. Has our Sea Grant Center for Coastal Tourism been engaged on this yet? I think they'd be a good resource for reviewing and providing input on this document if they haven't been already.
They have not had the opportunity because we are just still in the process of developing it, but that is a great idea. And the person to connect currently slips my mind. Can you remind me who I should ask? But I am also collecting like folks who, when we are ready, should review this document.
Yeah, again, that's for everybody else. That's our Sea Grant Center for Sustainable Coastal Tourism, and the director is Dr. Denise Conan, and the center's coordinated by Dolan Eversole.
Okay, that's what I thought. I did think it was Dolan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? And then I will kind of the order that I'm thinking is we receive testimony from the public on this. So I do want to first go to that, and then I would like to open it up to the folks who are who have raised their hand. So anything else from any of the commissioners?
Rosie, just one last thing. With regard to Brad's comment, made me think about hiking trails specifically and spread of invasive species. So it's certainly not my area of expertise, but my understanding is kind of less native species, more invasive species makes us less resilient to things like wildfire, among other things. So I don't know if that's something we also want to kind of look for some documentation around in terms of climate change and the spread of invasive species. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I want to thank the commissioners for that. I'm going to now share only because I believe it is the appropriate time. We did receive testimony from the public from Dr. Tankini. I know that Erica, you have raised your hand and I will recognize you, but given that we received this this testimony, I would like to invite Dr. Tankini to read their testimony into the record or to provide a summation. Is that something you'd like to do, Dr. Keeney? Oh, Dr. Keeney, you're muted. Hold on. Dr. Keeney, you're muted. Perfect, we hear you. Thank you.
Uh-oh. Well, I'd like to thank you, of course, first of all, for considering placing air transport of visitors into the document that you were creating on climate, visitor contribution to climate change. And I wonder if, you know, I actually was going to, I wrote out testimony to give orally today, but I can't see that testimony on my screen due to the fact that it is, I think we're in screen share. I'm not sure how to get out of that. But basically, some of the statements that were in the section on aviation, I think, need to be reconsidered. The fact is that reference was made to the fact that there were no definitive, or not many definitive studies on the element of the greenhouse gas emissions that is considered non-carbon dioxide emissions, and what those emissions contribution to the CO2e component would be. You know, that statement, though, to me, is similar to the statement that has been made, or statements that have been made by the oil companies for 50 years that's impaired, you know, the progress on consideration that it is, in fact, fossil fuel burning that has been at the root of climate change. The conclusion of that reference to the lack of definitive studies is that the IPCC makes a reference to there being low confidence in the judgment that contrail and contrail cirrus contribution to climate change is not or is significant. And the fact is that I'm familiar with the reference that the writer of that is making in AR6, but you know, that reference actually is to the judgment of the author of the AR6 study that is referred to over and over again. And that statement is actually a kind of bottom line statement of which concludes that the contribution of non-CO2 emissions is twice the contribution of carbon dioxide itself. It's not a statement that that is in reference to whether contrail and contrail cirrus is actually, really a contributor or not. The IR6 statement that it's referring to puts a probability distribution from 9 to 95%, and it is that probability distribution which makes the judgment that it is twice that the CO2, that the non-CO2 emissions are twice that of CO2. It's that probability distribution that makes it a low confidence judgment. But I wish to also point out that it's not the lowest level. There's also a very low confidence level that the AR6 assigns, and it's not so it's not very low confidence. It's a low confidence level statement.
Dr.
So
Cheney,
that's all I have.
Thank you. I was going to say I'm going to put a pause on you.
Rosie, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Oh, for me, I'm sorry.
I'm going to put a pause on you for that, as we do have a 3-minute time limit. What I'm going to add to my notes is that we will edit the sentence to say that the commission will continue to look for studies that assess non-CO2 contrail, et cetera, emissions. I do kind of want to clarify that low confidence in that sentence that you're referring to is in reference to not really knowing the coefficient. So 2 is the low confidence, I think, number. Okay, at this time, I want to recognize we had a couple other folks who had raised their hands to provide discussion and ideas. One of them I don't see on the call at the moment, but one of them was Erica. Erica, if you feel comfortable, you may either, come off. Thank you. I'll start your timer now.
Great. Aloha. Thank you so much for this discussion. It's a great discussion. I would just like to get a 2-part question. Is the role of visitors to our coral reefs, as well as our groundwater, caused by the impacts of wastewater and the lack of overall wastewater infrastructure that we have across our state? Currently, this burden is being financially put on the shoulders of local homeowners and the local population. And we currently don't have the infrastructure needed to even service our local population, let alone a number of visitors that come into our islands. And I was just wondering, kind of a twofold question is, one, the overall impact of our groundwater, as well as which is our drinking water, as well as overall impact of coral reefs specifically from this industry. And then the second part, I guess, is the overall potential of this industry actually being able to be a part of the financial solution, so our homeowners are not burdened by carrying the overall cost of cesspool conversion and additional wastewater infrastructure. That's all.
Thank you so much for your comments. I definitely recognize the how do I say this? Historical legacy infrastructure of our wastewater system across Hawaii. We certainly have the highest per capita cesspools and septic tanks in the nation. A lot of that does have to do with the balancing of how far sewage can reach, because sewage for very long, like the sewage plant system, sewage line was very much seen as like the only solution. Thankfully now we do definitely have other options potentially for more rural communities to have better, hopefully, autonomous, I guess I would say, sewage grid systems. That's a possibility. I also completely agree with you about how this model of local residents bearing the brunt of these expenses is quite difficult. I am trying to think about, I've taken notes on everything that you've asked about and whether or not some of the impacts we're seeing is about wastewater. I want to open it up to the commissioners. if you have any response to that or ideas for how we can incorporate these concerns into the brief.
Nothing at this time, Chair. I got to give some more thought to that. Thanks for the opportunity, though.
Okay. Commissioner Otsuka, no thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say same. I think I need some time to think about where that goes and how we fit it into the bigger document.
Yeah. Okay. I will put in a link in the chat about kind of your combined bill and some information just for the public to kind of better understand some of the breakdown of our water services, just as a way to kind of like have us think about this intersection. But I'm putting it down and I don't have a clear answer at this time. So I'm sorry, Erica, I don't have a clear answer, but I'm noting it down for us to kind of like think about as we move forward on the draft. The next person who had indicated they would like to provide testimony is Monique Schaefer. I apologize again if I'm mispronouncing your name and if it's Monica. Please feel free to come off of Zoom and provide your testimony for 3 minutes, starting now.
Mahalo, Rosie. Thank you all for looking into this. A couple of things that come to mind most immediately. I totally agree with Brad on the air conditioning concerns. One of my biggest pet peeves and something that immediately comes to mind is, the number of businesses that leave doors open and air conditioning pumping out of those buildings. And I would be curious if there's, policy mechanisms to enforce simple energy conservation and efficiency practices, particularly for some of the bigger businesses that support tourism. Second is regarding the aviation emissions. I think it's really important thing to maybe not necessarily look at the sources. I think that does fall to the state, but for the city, if length of stay, like extending length of stay, can reduce the total flight miles traveled, if there's ways to encourage increasing length of stay to decrease greenhouse gas emissions from air transport. That's it for me. Mahalo.
Thank you, Monique. Any other testimony at this time? I do want to share that we do have, there are some, they're called shut the front door laws. And perhaps this is an example that we can put into the document. These are not specific to tourism, they're more specific to businesses, but perhaps we can definitely kind of cite that as we develop the air conditioning section, which I'm hoping Brad might help us assist us in that area. Yeah, so I think that might be kind of something that we can think about as an example of things that are already in progress elsewhere in the country. Okay, great. Are there any other, oh, Commissioner Otsuka, can you please share what you just dropped into the chat?
Sure, yeah, I forgot to mention this during my initial round of comments. I plugged an article I read yesterday on Streets Blog into the chat. And it sort of talks about how the Maui bus was used to evacuate people during the fires themselves, and then is continuing to be used for recovery efforts to transport people, particularly those who've lost their car during the wildfires, to access government services, both from federal like FEMA, but also state and county services. So something for us to think about just in general for evacuation efforts, but I'm wondering if this is maybe applicable to the guidance document as well, either in the transport section or emergency services section, maybe both. So.
Thank you so much. I've captured that text and thrown it into my draft for us to kind of like look through and think about. Something else I just kind of started as far as like current events, and I know we have to go in and do the research more to dig through it, is the role. I've been reading a lot about the recovery in Florida post-hurricane, and that low like budget hotels seem to be a very important factor in where certain demographic sectors of the population end up long term. And I'm wondering um, what will be, does that have any kind of relatability or commensurability to things that happen in Hawaii? And by extension, do we have even budget hotels in Hawaii to the same extent that there are on the continent, right? So you have a whole lot of people who just, went evacuated to a motel and they're there like months later. And kind of thinking about, um, I know that's not tourist, but it's the accommodations industry. So I do definitely, I don't want to expand it crazy, this brief, but it is something that I have been reading, I basically anything that has to do with like the hotel industry and climate, I've been reading. And so I just wanted to share that the idea of housing, it does come back to your idea of maybe how we can tie it into housing, Kiana, of if residents are not able to afford housing, certainly on the continent, they've been relying on budget hotels. And do we even have that in Hawaii? So yeah, just kind of adding on to that. I think I'll put that into there. Okay, any other commentary from the public? Also want to welcome Director Gonzer to chime in if there's any kind of gaps that he sees that we might be having, or also others who are in OCCSR. If there's any gaps, I'm happy to like add those in as we work towards the next draft.
No, having just seen it on Monday with the posting, we'll look at it internally as a team as well. It's been a really robust discussion, a lot of important things to consider, and certainly within the realm of where the city has direct control, where we have leverage, where we have partnership opportunities, we'd want to think through that, provide that for your consideration as well.
Most definitely. And that's actually, I think in the gap analysis, identifying areas of opportunity and things that we're already working on is also really important to do, to see where we're already kind of working in and can do even better, or maybe even more specifically would be great. So I really welcome OCCSR's feedback as far as developing that section. I think to me, that would be like a really cool section to have, is like, these are what's already going on. It's not like people aren't doing anything. Okay, so with that in mind, with our remaining time, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, which is discussion on the in-development urban heat guidance brief. And I'm going to turn that over to Brad and Kiana to discuss. And I would also ask Kiana if you might maybe be able to introduce Robert, because I think he's an intern who's kind of been working with you on some of that issues.
Yeah, sure. So Brad and I, with the help of Robert, as well as Kara, I think Kara's on here, have been working on finalizing the questions, and then more recently the format of the survey. So we're almost there. We're hoping to release today for public comment. I think the only thing we have left to sort out, and Matt, I'll talk to you offline. We wanted to know whether there's any demographic data that the Office of Climate Change is interested in us collecting from our participants. So that's sort of the last puka in our finalizing the survey before we send it out. So not a huge update, Rosie, only that we hope to send out very shortly. And then Robert, if you want to introduce yourself. Robert's been our big help with sort of finalizing our document. Robert, I think you're doing your master's in communications. Please introduce yourself. I think that's probably better than me trying to remember what your background is in.
Aloha. Thank you for giving me the time. Yeah, I'm a current master's. Sorry, my room's kind of a mess. I'm a current master's student at the university, and I'm on contract with Dr. Keener at the East West Center. And yeah, it's been wonderful, and hopefully I'll be able to help Dr. Aldegato with the work that she's doing in the next couple months as well.
Thank you so much, Robert. We really appreciate the contributions of our interns, and also appreciate this ability to have interaction between our local university and OCCSR to help us to develop this information. Kiana, that's it, right, for you? I mean, I'm excited for the survey to come out and
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
forward to it. Yay.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add sort of some follow-up tests that Robert will be helping with Brad and I with, is sort of synthesizing all the results and comments we get from folks, and then helping us revise the urban heat guidance document to then bring to you folks, hopefully before the end of the year, to discuss, make further revisions, and then finalize. Oh, Brad, do you want to add anything? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave you out.
Only to say mahalo to Robert and Kara for their help in the survey and putting that together. Thank you, Robert. Yeah, we have a pretty exhaustive list of technical experts and interested parties to provide input on this document. So looking forward to the feedback on that. That's all. Thank you.
Mahalo. I think Kiana did ask, is there any demographic data that OCCSR wants to collect from participants? Matt, do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner Otsuka. We'll look back actually to see what the commission had done in its survey tool when we were looking at the building paper, building and greenhouse gas emissions, and we'll also reassess our practices. We're always refining the kinds of questions that we're asking on the demographics as well to better understand who we are and are not connecting with. So I can provide that to you offline.
Awesome. I'm really excited to see the survey and the results and have it be synthesized. I do believe that stakeholder and rights holder engagement is such a key component of what we do. And kind of touching back to the previous issue, agenda issue, Kiana, you had asked about the timeline. I mean, I just want to move at the speed of everybody, as long as it takes, or short. I mean, I don't want it to be 2 years. I'd like it to come out before that report is done. But I would like to make sure that we have good, this is, urban heat, as we know, is an emerging issue and like already a present issue, as is the terms and brief, as is briefs that we will take on in the future. So I think the speed of how fast our community is moving is good. We both sense the urgency, but also want to do a good job. So thank you for all of the work that you have been doing towards this. Okay, we're gonna move on now to that was so efficient. We're gonna move on now to the next item, which I do want to ask Matt to maybe take the lead on, which is discussion on tentative next meeting dates. He had brought up in the report on OCCSR that we may be getting back to this with regard to the Climate Ready Oahu updates, and so want to turn it back over to Director Gonzer.
Sure, just to reorient, the commission had expressed interest in hosting, 1 or 2 out in community meetings, live and in person. And obviously that, obligates staff and CCSR coordination so that we can facilitate. So we're pleased to think through that and brainstorm. And one iteration of that was posed to potentially be an official agendized commission meeting, and then sort of an open house on climate topics generally, with a focus on the Climate Ready Oahu adaptation strategy and like the moment to collect public feedback. We're still on schedule to have a public review period in the month of November at this point. We were similarly assessing what's the right push on in-person activities and what's the right push on us organizing our own things versus being at things that are already scheduled where people were already planning to be at. So we've gone in our proposal to balance really focusing on those kinds of opportunities, being where people are at already versus the assumption or big ask for people to come to our specific thing. That said, we're still trying to, in the spirit of the Commission's interest, focus on a couple of in-person activities. And what we're proposing right now, and this doesn't mean that the Commission can't have other meetings, right? There's the month of October, month of December, maybe those are virtual. But we're proposing to look at the weeks of November the 6th and the 13th as really a push for us to be out in community at different events and farmers markets and the like, but to host 2 Climate Ready Oahu open houses. And one proposal is that the commission could also participate not in a full-on agenda, all 5 commission members, but be part of a level setting introduction presentation, introduction to the who and the what of the commission, and then also have sort of a booth or a table or a station in conjunction with the other aspects of an open house. That could facilitate no more than 2 commissioners to attend, as it's not an official meeting. So that's one idea. We're still finalizing for our schedule and needs, the locations, times, and dates of what those might be, but we're looking to do, it might be that our organized, CCSR organized events might be in the same week. They might be one each of the weeks of November 6th and November 13. And we're per the commission's interest also trying to focus on a leeward and let's call it upper windward location for the ones that we organize ourselves, and then maximize existing community schedules to just be out there meeting people where they're at.
Thank you so much, Matt. So yeah, general, just kind of letting the commissioners know to please take a look at your calendars. And I appreciate the discussion that Matt had and the discussion with OCCSR and wanting to really utilize and yet not overburden our workers as well as our communities with our presence in there. I will personally hold week of November 6th and November 13th as open as I can, so that I can be present for whatever modalities or formats we decide to go with. So I'm hoping that Brad and Kiana, you'll also try and join us as you can. Does that look okay, those weeks so far for you folks?
Rosie, I'll be out the week of November 6th at a conference, but I'll be back the week of the 13th. So I'd be more than happy to join in person. I'm really excited.
Yay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
At this point, I look pretty available those 2 weeks.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll look to yes, Matt.
Yeah, and I just to reemphasize, certainly, this is a primary focus of the Climate Ready Oahu work, and there's nothing to stop the commission from having, say, a meeting in October and or a meeting in December, if that is what you choose to do, and we'll help to facilitate that as well.
I think we will look to having meetings in October as well as December. There are kind of other moving briefs that might be coming up, and I think it would be good to have some speakers. There's a couple of speakers that I'm interested in inviting to come and like help inform some of what we're working on. And certainly commissioners, if you have ideas of speakers that you would like to bring to the commission, please just contact trying to think about the best way sunshine wise, contact Quran with those ideas, and we can figure out the best way to invite them for future meetings. But yeah, I am looking to having meetings in October and December. At this point, I think we will utilize the power of the poll to figure out when those dates might be most effective. So great, thank you. At this time, let's move to are there any other comments or kind of thoughts?
I just wanted to also mention my comment from last month's meeting. I'd love the opportunity, and Matt, I appreciate folks having a really thoughtful discussion internally about what our sort of in-person meetings look like, and not trying to burden folks. So not necessarily having to present the urban heat guidance document at an in-person meeting, but at least the opportunity to talk story with folks about it in person, I think would be ideal if can.
Sure, thank you for that. Yeah, and we could talk through sort of the materials we can help produce, print, and have resources available to resource your table or booth or however we envision it. And then also, I just want to emphasize that we're definitely looking at the commission's pledge, equity pledge, to assess different criteria and hopefully tick off as many of those intentions as possible.
Great. I appreciate that. I'm hoping to come by bus, so I'm hoping it's not a far walk from the bus stop.
It might be a far bus ride, but yes.
Very awesome. Yeah, keep us, I'm happy to table. You know, I'm not above hanging out and doing tabling events, so I'm excited. I can already envision like having a table with all of our guidance documents and being like, come and take one. I mean, I've certainly done that for Sea Grant, so I'm happy to do it for the commission as well. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item, which is communications and correspondence from the public. This is definitely an opportunity for the public to provide testimony. If they didn't have the opportunity to send in some, we did have Dr. Keeney send in their testimony. Those have been registered. I also want to note that Walter Billingsley did put some information in the chat. Walter, I don't know if you want to come off mute and restate it and maybe contextualize. I don't know if this was in reference to the testimony that Erica had provided earlier, or if this relates to something totally different. If not, I'm happy to read it. So.
Well, that's fine. It's kind of can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just kind of a perspective of, in my mind, how tourism use of water and generation of wastewater kind of impacts with the systems that we have, because in the collection systems themselves, you know, we have issues with saltwater intrusion, and of course, you know, as we know, the limited water supply, and then in non-sewered areas, and there may be some tourist activities in non-sewered areas as well, then the individual wastewater systems are, a lot of them are going to be failing and very much challenged by sea level rise. So I just thought I'd throw that in as kind of a way to maybe connect, you know, her comments about water and wastewater with the tourism industry.
Thank you so much. I've taken this text and I'm adding it to my notes for this draft. And yeah, this is great. Thank you so much. Okay, any other testimony from the public at this time regarding this or any of the other matters that we have taken up today? All right, so we will move on to public input for matters not on the agenda. I think we've kind of covered that actually by accident. I've done that. So again, please, if anybody wants to raise their hand or put a question in the chat, very welcome to do so. Okay, seeing none, I'd like to move to the announcements. Do any of the commissioners have announcements they would like to make?
I just plugged in my monthly reminder that the state DOT is administering an electric bike and electric moped rebate. So I put the criteria in there for you to receive up to $500 or 20% of the retail price for both electric bikes and electric mopeds. So you must participate in a low-income program or do not own a motor vehicle, or be enrolled in school, college, or university and be 18 and over. So more information in the link that I posted in the chat.
Thank you so much. Brad, do you have any announcements?
Nothing today, Chair. Thank you.
So we have reached the end of our agenda, and if there are no other comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, OCCSR staff. Appreciate everybody.
Thank you, Rosie.